The Vietnam War was a long, costly armed conflict that pitted the communist regime of North Vietnam against South Vietnam and its main ally, the United States of America. The war began in 1954, and by 1969, at the peak of U.S. involvement in the war, more than 500,000 U.S. military personnel were involved in the Vietnam conflict. We had the pleasure of sitting down with one of these military personnel and speak to him about his personal experience in the war. His name is Ferry. He's currently 65 years old, and he works for Lower Gwinnett, umpiring Little League baseball games as well as running the snack stand. Jerry fought in the jungle, and he saw a lot of very bad, graphic things that we don't really get to hear about or see in the mainstream media. So with no further ado, let's get to hear what Jerry has to say.
Okay, the Vietnam War got started. United States went into Vietnam basically to take over what the French couldn't do. They wanted to keep the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese separated. They didn't want the North Vietnamese to go into South Vietnam and make them a communist country. Well, when Johnson took over, he was the initial president to put the upscale of the war with the constant bombing and flushing more troops into Vietnam. That's basically what Johnson was doing. Johnson just supported the war in Vietnam and just kept, escalating it by sending more troops, more bombing, more troops, more bombing. Vietnam, it was fought in the jungle, which when the jungle fighting is a lot different than any other fighting because you have the elements are there. You have the heat, you have the rain, and you have whatever elements is there. World War I and World War II, if you look at it, number one, the weaponry wasn't as good as it was in Vietnam. A lot of the ways you got around Vietnam was in helicopters and stuff like that. So, but, it was a different war altogether than World War I, World War II. Because Vietnam was a war that the American people didn't want to be in. That's basically what it was. It was protests from college to college, everywhere. That get the troops out of Vietnam. Young men, 18, 19, 20 years old, were dying for no reason at all, and the people were tired of the United States being the good guy and helping other people in the world. At all, none at all. You had a talk with the Vietnam leaders and so on and so forth, but it just got to a point where the United States figured that they'll just, take their losses and get home and leave well enough alone. Well, the United States will never, not be in some kind of conflict. You got to understand, when you're the most powerful country in the world, you'll always be in conflicts or always be helping people. You can go to the Desert Storm, you can go to Iran, you can go to Iraq, you can go to Afghanistan. All of those wars were wars that the United States were part in because they were helping the so-called smaller countries. Oh, the war. When you're in war, your productivities go up with the supply and demand of weaponry and clothing for your soldiers and everything. So your economy will be making money because of the war.
So war helps countries to build up a little bit more.
War helps this country to build up some money. You know, and it's the same wherever you're fighting. You know, whether it's in Iraq, Desert Storm, wherever you are, you know, you're making planes, you're making tanks, you're making all of this stuff to supply for the war, and all of that generates and helps your economy. Well, the war on terror is a war that we never thought would come to the United States, you know, because we thought we were invincible and nobody would come over here and basically try to step on our toes, but we got our toes stepped on the 9/11 scenario, and we even got our toes stepped on for the what was it, New York or Boston Marathon when those kids did the bombing. And a few years ago, when they bombed the subways in New York, I mean, you know, our security system has gotten better, and that's basically the way it's going to work. It was a war that we should have never been in, but you know, it is what it is, and you know, our country will always be involved in some kind of conflict elsewhere because the United States never really wants the conflict to be here. Right. You know, because we're the only country that has never had a home battle here in the United States of America. It's a small country that there was no threat on us. Yeah. You know, but but in the First World War and Second World War, you had Germany, France, Britain, England, everybody, Italy, all the big axis was joining each other and fighting each other. So the United States had to take a side on which one, and whatever side the United States took would win. Well, not because we didn't fight Vietnam as a war. We fought it as a conflict. See, it's no way a small country like Vietnam, North Vietnam, should have affected us. We could have went out there and just destroyed the whole North Vietnam, but you know, we didn't want to look like the big mean bad guys. We went in there in the beginning in North Vietnam or South Vietnam to be consultants.
Done laid around and played around Vietnam too long. Summer's almost gone, monsoon's coming on. Done laid around and played around Vietnam too long, and I feel like I really want to go home.